Alex Rivers always considered himself a happy man. He had a good job as a middle manager in a small financial company, a cozy house in a quiet suburb, and a beautiful wife, with whom he had been married for almost 5 years. In the morning, he went to the office, listening to the latest news on the radio. During the day, he dealt with reports and scheduled meetings, and in the evening, he returned home, where Kayla was waiting for him, a bright, cheerful girl with whom there was never a dull moment. Their marriage seemed exemplary to others. Alex and Kayla smiled in joint photographs, went shopping on weekends, sometimes went to the cinema or to friends for a barbecue. But in recent months, Alex had begun to notice something was different. Kayla would often stay late at work or say she was going out with her friends, when she used to prefer spending her evenings at home. She became distracted, sometimes forgetting to ask him how his day was. Messages would constantly flash on her phone, and when Alex happened to see the screen, she would quickly hide it in her purse. He found himself suspecting something was wrong, but he dismissed the thoughts as paranoia. Just a lot of work, he told himself. We all have stressful periods. One afternoon, midweek, his boss announced that an important client meeting had to be rescheduled. With an unexpected free evening, Alex decided to surprise his wife by buying her favorite Chinese takeout and coming home early to have dinner together. He remembered how long it had been since they had spent a quiet family evening together. Perhaps this was what they were missing. On the way home, Alex stopped at a small restaurant where he and Kayla often got noodles and spicy sesame chicken. While he waited for his order, he checked his phone. There were no new messages from Kayla. She said she was working from home today. She had remote access to the office server, a feature she sometimes took advantage of. Alex imagined her, perhaps in her pajamas, sitting in the kitchen with her laptop, sipping coffee. It was a cozy picture, and it warmed his heart. After getting the bags of food, Alex stopped at the liquor store for a bottle of white wine. Kayla liked semi-sweet wines from California, and he found a familiar label on the shelf, a peaky Chardonnay they had once drunk on their anniversary. After paying, he headed home, looking forward to a pleasant evening. It was already getting dark outside when Alex pulled up to his house. It was a typical two-family home in a row of similarly neat houses. Teenagers were playing ball on the neighboring lawn, and a dog was barking somewhere in the distance. Alex got out of the car, carefully picked up a bag of food and a bottle of wine. He was happy to think how surprised Kayla would be to see him early. As he walked up the steps, he noticed a pair of men's sneakers by the front door, big ones, clearly not Kayla's or his own. Alex's heart sank. He frowned. Maybe one of his friends had stopped by. But Kayla hadn't said anything about visitors, and the sneakers were unfamiliar to him. His hand reached for the doorknob. The door was unlocked, so Kayla probably wasn't expecting guests or simply forgot to close it. Alex quietly entered the hallway. The house was silent, except for a muffled noise coming from the bedroom upstairs, the creaking of a bed. Voices? Alex put the dinner bags on the hallway table and walked up the stairs slowly, trying not to make a sound. His heart was pounding so hard now that it seemed like it could be heard throughout the house. The higher he climbed, the louder the sounds became. He heard soft sounds, a woman's voice, Kayla's voice. He felt a chill. Without remembering himself, he almost ran out onto the second-floor landing and pushed open the bedroom door. The picture that opened up before him, like a flash of a spotlight, illuminated his worst suspicions. Two people were lying on a rumpled bed, Kayla and a man. Both froze, staring at Alex, who had thrown open the door. For a few seconds, all three were silent. For a split second, time seemed to stop. A completely different image emerged in Alex's memory, a smiling Kayla in a white dress on their wedding day, happy and loving. How different that picture was from what he had just seen. Alex felt the blood boiling in his veins and the noise in his ears growing. His hands clenched into fists on their own. Kayla was the first to come to her senses, quickly pulling the blanket over herself. "Alex, it's not what you think," she muttered in a breaking voice, her eyes wide with horror. The man jumped out of bed, frantically grabbing his jeans from the floor. Alex recognized him, Travis, Kayla's colleague. whom he had seen a couple of times at corporate parties. Tall, athletic, with a Hollywood smile, although now the smile had disappeared from his face, he looked scared. "Shit, Alex," Travis began, quickly pulling up his jeans. "This isn't what you—" But Alex no longer heard their words. He was overcome with such rage that his vision darkened. He no longer had control over himself. The dinner bags and the bottle of wine were left abandoned downstairs. The evening he had planned as a romantic one had turned into a nightmare. Kayla screamed piercingly. "No, please, stop," but Alex couldn't hear her anymore. "Alex, stop," Kayla cried, trying to grab her husband's hand. She grabbed his forearm, but Alex jerked his hand away, throwing her off. Alex froze for a moment, realizing that he had pushed his wife. "Help!" Kayla screamed into the distance, probably hoping her neighbors would hear. She rushed to the nightstand, grabbing her phone. With shaking fingers, she tried to dial 911. "Stop! Police!" A loud shout rang out. Alex woke up from his rage and saw two uniformed police officers in front of him. One of them was forcibly pressing his face against the wall, twisting his arms behind his back. Alex tried to say something, but immediately felt the cold metal of handcuffs on his wrists. "Don't move," repeated the second officer. Kayla ran out into the hallway, holding her phone. It seemed she had called the police, and they had arrived very quickly. She was sobbing, looking from Alex to Travis. Soon more people appeared on the stairs, paramedics with a stretcher. They carefully helped Travis up. Alex suddenly felt his anger evaporate, replaced by a cold realization of what had happened. His hands were numb in the handcuffs, the cold wall pressed against his cheek. He heard his own heartbeat. What had he done? His gaze found Kayla. She was standing against the wall, shaking, her hands pressed to her mouth. Their eyes met for a second, fear and pain in her gaze. Alex wanted to say something, apologize, justify himself, but the words were stuck in his throat. The officers dragged Alex down the steps. The lights of the police car and the ambulance were already flashing on the porch. Neighbors were gathered outside, talking excitedly. Alex was placed in the back of the cruiser. The door slammed, cutting him off from the outside world. Through the windows, he saw Travis being loaded on a stretcher into the ambulance. Kayla was standing nearby, talking to the officer, looking back and forth between the ambulance and the cruiser where Alex was sitting. The flashing lights cast a flickering blue light all around. Alex leaned his head against the seat and closed his eyes. His hands were burning behind his back from the cuffs. His ears were still ringing, either from the fight or from the realization that he had ruined his life with one burst of rage. The patrol car pulled away, taking Alex away from his home, which had recently been full of warmth and love for him, but had now turned into a nightmare. The lights of neighboring houses floated past the dusty glass. Alex silently looked ahead, unable to believe that all this was really happening. Alex sat on a hard bench in the small holding cell, his elbows on his knees and his head down. The lamp in the cell was dimly burning. There were two others in the cell besides him, a stooped tramp smelling of fumes, dozing listlessly in the corner, and a young guy nervously pacing back and forth in front of the bars. The guy sighed loudly every now and then and fidgeted with his hands, but Alex paid no attention to him. The scene in the bedroom played over and over in his mind's eye. Kayla in bed with Travis, his wife's frightened eyes full of tears. Alex clenched his fists, trying to drive away these images, but they did not go away. Finally, an officer approached the cell. The lock clanged loudly. "Rivers, get out," the policeman said. Alex stood up, feeling his legs go numb. The officer took him by the elbow and led him down the corridor. He was taken to a small room where a woman of about 40 in a business suit was sitting at a table with a folder in her hands. Another policeman was standing nearby. The woman pointed to a chair opposite Alex. "Mr. Rivers, I'm Detective Morneau," she said formally. "Sit down." Alex sat down on a chair without looking up. "I need to ask you a few questions," the detective said, opening the folder. "Do you understand what you're being accused of?" Alex nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. "On the attack," he answered quietly. Aggravated grievous bodily harm, Morneau said, looking at him intently. Tell me how it happened. He was silent for a few seconds. How did it all happen? A terrible carousel flashed through his head. He found his wife with her lover. He lost control. He closed his eyes, trying to find the words. I came home, Alex began hoarsely, feeling his throat ache. Earlier than usual. Wanted to surprise my wife. And then, I heard them upstairs. Found. He swallowed and continued bitterly, found my wife with another man in our bed. Detective Morneau listened attentively, her head slightly bowed. Alex absently noticed the wedding ring on her hand. Next, she asked softly. Alex looked at the table, examining the scratches on the worn surface. I don't remember exactly. I got angry. I felt sick. Everything was in a fog. I attacked him. Then the police arrived. You hit Mr. Clark several times. He's in the hospital now, Morneau said crisply. Your wife filed a report, and the beatings were recorded. Alex covered his face with his hands. The detective's words throbbed in his ears like pain, broken ribs, a statement. Of course Kayla had testified against him. How could she not? He was to blame. Listen, the detective said, softening her voice a little. I understand the situation is difficult, but you must understand the seriousness of it. You are facing a prison term. It is better to cooperate with the investigation. Alex nodded wearily. He wasn't going to resist, and there was no point. Everything was obvious. Do you have someone I can call? A lawyer? Morneau asked, closing the folder. He thought about it. He had no parents, they had died long ago. His closest relatives, his sister, lived on the other side of the country. His relationships with his friends had deteriorated over the years of marriage. They mostly communicated in pairs, and now, he should probably call Mark, an old friend from his student years, with whom he sometimes went fishing. But he was ashamed to ask for help. They'll assign me a public defender, Alex answered quietly, realizing that he didn't have the money for an expensive lawyer. The detective nodded slightly and stood up. Okay, Mr. Rivers, you will be returned to your cell. Expect your formal arraignment and bail hearing tomorrow morning. She left, and the policeman took Alex back. He spent the rest of the night without sleep, sitting on the same hard bench. The young man was transferred somewhere else by morning. The tramp continued to sleep, snoring. Alex tried to pray, then just sat, staring at the floor. His thoughts became increasingly dark. At some point, Alex caught himself on a terrible desire, just not to feel this pain and shame. He shook his head, driving away the dark thoughts. No, he had to hold on for himself. For those who still believed in him, if there were any left. In the morning, he was taken to a short court hearing where the judge formally read the charges. The public defender, a thin man in his 30s, familiarized himself with the case file and asked for Alex to be released on bail. The judge set bail at $10,000. Alex did not have that kind of money, and there was no one to post it for him. So he had to remain in custody until the next hearing. After the hearing, Alex was returned to his cell. By this time, the news of his arrest had already spread. It turned out that Mark had found out about what had happened after all. Perhaps Kayla or one of their mutual friends had told him. During the day, a prison guard came and said that Alex had a visitor. Behind the glass of the visiting room, Alex saw Mark, a short, plump man with a kind face. He took off his baseball cap and nervously twirled it in his hands while Alex sat down opposite him. "Damn, buddy," was all Mark said instead of a greeting, looking at Alex with sympathy. When I heard it, I didn't even believe it at first. Alex looked down. "Hello, Mark. How are you holding up?" Mark asked uncertainly. Alex smiled bitterly. "How can I hold on? I've done a lot of things, as you can see." Mark shook his head. "Look, I'm not making excuses for Kayla, but you, damn it, gave it too. That's how it is. I called a couple of mutual friends. We'll try to raise money for bail. I would do it myself, but I'm tight right now." "No need," Alex interrupted him wearily. "I'm not going to run anywhere. I'll sit and think about my behavior, as they say." Mark exhaled loudly and put his cap down on the table. Dude, what nonsense. Let's hope everything turns out okay. Maybe we'll get off with probation. That would be nice. Alex shrugged. Whatever will be, will be. Thank you for coming. They talked for a while longer, Mark doing most of the talking, lamely sympathizing and railing against unfaithful wives and those dandies like Travis. Alex listened with half an ear. He felt ashamed and bitter. He knew Mark was trying to cheer him up, but it was no use. After his friend left, Alex again sank into heavy thoughts. The following days dragged on painfully long. Several times he was taken to the investigator for additional questions. Alex answered honestly without denying his guilt. His defense attorney advised him to make a deal with justice, admit guilt in exchange for a lighter sentence. In fact, there was no other choice. There was no point in denying the obvious. Finally, the day of the trial arrived. It was a separate hearing where they would hear the verdict. Alex sat in the courtroom next to his defense attorney. For the first time since that night, he saw Kayla sitting in the back of the courtroom with a man. It seemed to be Travis's older brother or some other relative, and he put his arm around Kayla when they made eye contact. Alex forced himself to look away, feeling a twinge of pain. He also noticed Travis himself pale, with a band-aid across his nose and the shadow of a bruise on his cheekbone. Travis sat a little ways away, with his attorney and, presumably, his mother, who was whispering something to him and holding his hand. The judge, an elderly man with glasses, entered and everyone stood up. The case was read out. The prosecutor outlined the circumstances. Alex Rivers, 32, no previous convictions, is charged with aggravated assault, causing grievous bodily harm. The prosecutor described the victim's injuries, noting that the crime was committed on domestic grounds. The defendant caught his wife with the victim and lost his temper. The prosecutor insisted that such a reprisal requires a real prison term. He asked for 3 years in prison for Alex, citing the seriousness of the injuries inflicted and the psychological trauma of the victims. Then the victim was called to speak. Travis stood up, holding the lectern. His voice was muffled. He said he thought he was going to die that night, that he still felt pain. He asked the court not to be soft. Nobody should get away with something like that, he said, looking sideways at Alex. Kayla was also called to testify as a witness. She, nervously fiddling with her handkerchief, confirmed that Alex was furious, and she was afraid for her life. Her voice was shaking, and these shaking intonations made Alex feel unbearably ashamed. He hung his head, feeling like a monster. The defense attorney, in turn, noted the mitigating circumstances. Alex immediately admitted his guilt and deeply repents, had no previous convictions, and is positively characterized as a peaceful, hardworking person. The attorney emphasized that the crime was committed in a state of severe emotional shock and asked the court to treat it with understanding and leniency. Alex sat with his head down during these speeches. He was unbearably ashamed. When the judge asked if he had anything to say before sentencing, Alex stood up on shaky legs. He turned around for a moment. His gaze fell on Kayla. She avoided meeting his eyes. "Your Honor," Alex began hoarsely, "there is no excuse for what I did. I'm so sorry. I lost control and made a terrible mistake. I'm prepared to take my punishment. I'm just sorry." He addressed the last words not so much to the judge as to everyone he had let down. Alex bit his lip and sat down. The judge nodded after hearing him out. Then a tense silence fell over the courtroom as the judge leafed through some papers. Finally, he began to read out the sentence, taking into account the lack of a criminal record, positive characteristics, but also the severity of the injuries inflicted. The judge noted that the crime was committed in a state of passion, but this did not exempt from responsibility. Alex listened with bated breath. "Based on the above, the court sentences you, Mr. Rivers, to 1 year of imprisonment suspended for 2 years probation." The judge paused, and Alex's heart sank, and with a referral to compulsory psychiatric treatment for a period of 6 months. At a specialized institution, you will undergo a course of therapy aimed at anger management and impulse control. After discharge, you will be under the supervision of a psychologist at your place of residence for the remainder of your probationary period. Alex didn't immediately understand the meaning. Not prison, a suspended sentence, and psychiatric treatment. He blinked, trying to comprehend. He was not being sent to prison, but instead he was supposed to be treated. Relief and anxiety mixed in his soul. Treatment meant several months in a psychiatric clinic. But the alternative was a prison cell with criminals. Perhaps that was the best outcome he could hope for. He heard someone sigh behind him. Maybe Kayla, maybe Travis's mother. The prosecutor said something else about Alex being banned from the victims and having to attend an anger management class after treatment. The judge nodded. Then the formalities ended with the bang of the gavel, and everyone stood. The escort took Alex by the elbows and led him to the exit of the hall. On the way out, he met Kayla's eyes. Her gaze still showed fear and maybe a bit of regret. Alex looked away and walked past. This was the last time he saw his wife. Alex was transferred from the county jail to a psychiatric ward a few days after the trial. A convoy took him to a state-run halfway house outside of town. It was a low, gray building with barred ground floor windows surrounded by a fence. Inside, there was a smell of disinfectant and something sour, possibly medication. Alex went through the registration process. They took away his personal belongings, gave him simple light blue hospital pajamas and soft slippers. He was given the rules. Wake up at 7 a.m., lights out at 10 p.m., 3 meals, mandatory therapeutic sessions. He was taken to a ward, a small room for 2 people. There was already a second bed there, on which sat an elderly man, intently solving a crossword puzzle. "New guy, huh?" the man asked, looking up. He had gray hair and a tired but kindly expression. "It looks like it," Alex answered cautiously, sitting down on the empty bed. "I'm Greg," the neighbor introduced himself, putting down the newspaper. "What's wrong with you?" Alex hesitated. Even here, in the psychiatric ward, he was ashamed to talk about the reasons. "Family troubles," he said vaguely. Greg nodded understandingly. "I see. Don't worry, everything is out of place here at first. You'll get used to it. I'm already in my 3rd month. Depression knocked me down, and now they've patched it up a bit." Alex just nodded, not knowing what to say. He wanted to sink into the ground from the realization of where he had ended up. A few minutes later, a nurse, a young woman in a mint-colored uniform, looked in the door. "Mr. Rivers, the doctor is waiting for you," she said amiably. "Come with me." Alex stood up, glancing at Greg, who gave him a thumbs up, as if to say, "Good luck." Alex followed the nurse down a long hallway with pale yellow walls. They entered an office where a doctor in a white coat sat at a desk. "Have a seat, Mr. Rivers," said the doctor, gesturing to a chair. "My name is Dr. Miller, and I am your attending physician." Alex sat up, looking at the doctor. Dr. Miller was a man of about 50, with a short beard and an attentive gaze. He held a thin folder in his hands. "So," the doctor began, leafing through the papers, "the court has referred you to us for 6 months of treatment. Anger management, to be specific, plus general mental health. How are you feeling now?" Alex shrugged. "Normal, I guess." The doctor put the folder aside and folded his hands. "I know it's hard at first, but we're here to help. Our program includes individual therapy once a week, daily group sessions, and, if needed, medication support. Have you been treated by a psychiatrist or psychologist before?" "No, never," Alex answered. Dr. Miller nodded. "I see. Well, let's start gradually. Take a rest today, get used to it. Tomorrow morning, there will be a group at 10 a.m. in the hall on the 1st floor. For now, I'll give you a light sedative for the night, so you can sleep peacefully." Alex just nodded. They sent him back to his ward. He spent the rest of the day there in silence, talking to almost no one. He had dinner in the common dining room. The food was bland. Stewed vegetables, a piece of chicken casserole. The other patients, about 10 people of different ages, were sitting at tables, talking. Some were clearly under the influence of strong drugs and were acting sluggish. Alex felt like an outsider. It seemed to him that this was a terrible dream, and soon he would wake up. He barely slept the first night. The sedative helped him sleep only briefly. His thoughts revolved around what had happened. Scenes flashed before his closed eyes again and again. Alex tossed and turned on the hard bed, listening to Greg's rhythmic snoring. He felt despair and loneliness such as he had never experienced in his life. In the morning, they were awakened by a phone call. Alex reluctantly got up. The nurses were handing out pills. He was given a small white pill. They said it was a mild antidepressant. Alex silently took the medicine, washing it down with water from a plastic cup. After a simple breakfast, oatmeal and toast, the patients were gathered in the room for group therapy. They sat in a circle on chairs. For the first time, Alex was able to make out the others. A young girl with sad eyes, an elderly gray-haired Greg, his neighbor, a stocky man in a sweatshirt, frowning and crossing his arms over his chest, a couple more people. The group was led by a psychologist, an energetic woman in her 30s with a short haircut, whose name was Emily. "Good morning," she began. "We have a newcomer today. Will you introduce yourself?" Alex felt a lump in his throat. He didn't like talking about himself, especially in front of strangers. "Uh, my name is Alex," he managed. "I'm here by court order." Several people nodded understandingly, as if this was a normal thing. Emily, the psychologist, smiled. "Welcome, Alex. Everyone is equal here, so I hope you feel safe and can work on yourself." Alex said nothing, looking down. One by one, the group members began sharing how their week had gone. A girl, with tears in her eyes, told how she had written a letter to her mother. A stocky man reluctantly admitted that last night he had had another nightmare about his injury from the army. It was Alex's turn. Everyone looked at him. Emily gently asked if he wanted to share anything about himself or his feelings now. Alex shrugged, feeling the tension. "I don't know. I have nothing to say. I just want to get out of here as soon as possible." "That's natural," the psychologist nodded. "Many people want to get it over with as quickly as possible at first. But since you're here, try to get the most out of the treatment. We're not forcing you. Just know that if you want to share, we'll listen." After the group, the day dragged on. Alex read magazines he found in the common room, wrote a little in the notebook he was given. Dr. Miller met with him individually a couple of days later. At these meetings, Alex was initially very withdrawn. The doctor asked questions about his past, about his marriage, about that evening, but Alex answered in monosyllables. "Are you angry with your wife?" The doctor asked him bluntly one day, looking him in the eye. Alex clenched his fists on his knees and quietly replied, "Yes, probably yes, she betrayed me." "And what about that man?" "On him." "Even more," Alex breathed out, feeling the rage stir inside him again at the memory of Travis. "They both betrayed me." Dr. Miller nodded thoughtfully. "I understand. Your reaction, anger, fury is in many ways an understandable emotion to betrayal. But the problem is how this fury overwhelmed you. You could have killed that man, you understand." Alex lowered his head. He tried not to think about it, but the doctor was right, he could have killed. "I'm really ashamed," he said quietly. "I didn't mean to. It just happened." "That's what we're going to do," the doctor said softly. "Learn to control impulses, understand your anger before it spills out, and also let go of the situation. Yes, you were betrayed. It's painful, unfair. But if you let this resentment burn you further, you'll ruin your life completely. Here you're already at rock bottom, you've lost a lot, even your freedom for a while. But you can push off the bottom to float up." Alex was silent, digesting the doctor's words. Pushing off the bottom. Sounds simple, but how? Slowly, week by week, he settled into the routine of the clinic. He became friends with his neighbor Greg. In the evenings, they would play chess in the lobby or walk in the small courtyard under the supervision of the staff. Greg would tell stories about his youth, about how he had fought in Vietnam. Alex was surprised at how old he was, but Greg joked that he had joined the service as a boy. Sometimes Greg would offer wisdom on life. "If your wife leaves you, you'll find another son. The main thing is not to eat yourself up from the inside. Alex listened, not always responding, but he was grateful for the company of this gray-haired man. In the groups, Alex also gradually began to speak first a couple of phrases, then more and more. When his time came, he once told how he loved his wife and how her betrayal hurt him. They listened to him attentively. After the session, that young girl even came up to him and quietly said, "Hang in there, Alex. You seem like a good person, you're just unlucky." He thanked her and felt a strange relief. Sharing his pain made him feel a little better. In one-on-one sessions, Dr. Miller taught him anger management techniques, deep breathing, walking away from a triggering situation, mentally counting to 10. Alex was skeptical about it. In the midst of a rage like that, it seemed impossible to stop. But he still tried to remember the advice. And on the doctor's recommendation, Alex decided to write a letter to Kayla to let out everything that was hurting him, although he had no intention of sending the letter. Late in the evening, bending over a piece of notebook paper in the dim light of a night lamp, he could not begin for a long time. But then, taking a deep breath, he wrote the first words with a pen. "Dear Kayla, I thought for a long time whether to write to you. You will probably never read this letter, but I need to tell you. You hurt me, the most painful thing I've ever experienced. The day I saw you with another man, it was like my whole world collapsed. I felt furious, humiliated, and desperate. I lost control and did something I regret. Forgive me for that cruelty, even though you hurt me badly too. I am healing and I understand now that I must let go of this pain. You were once everything to me. We lived together wonderful years, and I am grateful to you for them. But what was can no longer be returned. I accept this. I am not writing to blame. I will say honestly, I forgive you. Maybe not right away, not completely yet, but I forgive. And I let you go. You are free from my expectations and grievances. I hope you have found your happiness with that person or otherwise, and I will seek my own path. Thank you for all the good things that happened between us. Goodbye." Alex. Having written the last line, Alex put the pen down. His hand was shaking a little. The lines blurred before his eyes. He himself did not notice how tears welled up in his eyes. But these were tears of relief. He carefully folded the sheet of paper and put it away in the nightstand. He was not going to send the letter. It had done its job, helped him throw off the weight from his soul. As his possible discharge date approached, Dr. Miller, noting his progress, began preparing the paperwork. A week before leaving, the doctor asked at the last session, "How do you feel now when you remember that night?" Alex thought about it. The pain of betrayal still echoed inside, but it was no longer sharp, but dull background. Sadness, probably, he admitted, and shame for what I've done. And anger at your wife, at her lover? Alex looked down at his folded hands. Anger is not the same as it was. Probably it remains somewhere deep, but I feel more hurt and offended than I want revenge. I don't want to touch anyone anymore. Dr. Miller nodded with satisfaction. It's a good sign. Of course, the pain won't go away that easily. But you're already in control of yourself. You can think clearly. Remember, there's a new life ahead if you want it. It's important not to get stuck in the past. Try to forgive as much as possible and move on. Forgiveness, Alex couldn't do that yet. But he knew for sure that he didn't want to see Kayla anymore, much less take serious revenge on her and Travis. Let them live as they knew how, and he would try to start over. This thought was scary, but it also gave a glimmer of hope. Early in the morning, Alex was given his clothes and personal belongings, the few things he had left. His wedding ring, watch, wallet, and phone had been kept in the clinic safe all these months. Alex put on jeans and a shirt, which now seemed loose. He had lost several kilograms during his treatment. Dr. Miller shook his hand as he said goodbye, saying, "Good luck, Alex. Remember what we said. The doors of my consultation will be open if needed." "Thank you for everything, doctor," Alex said sincerely. He felt mixed emotions, joy at his newfound freedom and anxiety about the unknown future. Mark was already waiting for him on the clinic steps. Having learned about the discharge date, Mark offered to take Alex. Seeing his friend, Alex smiled slightly. Mark had gone a little gray at the temples over the past 6 months, but the same kind face expressed relief. Finally, buddy, Mark hugged Alex tightly. How are you? Hey, Alex hugged his friend back. Okay, I guess. Nice to get outside. They headed toward Mark's parked car, an old pickup truck. Mark slammed the door behind him and drove off. I brought you some stuff, Mark said, nodding toward the back seat. Alex turned around and saw a duffel bag. When you and Kayla were leaving, she sent your stuff through a mutual friend. I took it for safekeeping. Clothes, shoes, some papers. I thought you might need it. Alex felt an unpleasant lump in his chest when he saw that very bag. Belongings. That was all that was left of his former life. He quietly thanked Mark. They drove in silence for a while. Alex looked out the window at the fields and houses running past. After half a year in a confined space, the landscape seemed bright, almost jarring. Finally, Mark spoke. What were you thinking of doing now? Any plans? Alex sighed. Honestly, I don't know. Return home. And there's nowhere to return to, essentially. It's also unclear about work. I'll have to look for something from scratch. You can stay with me for now, Mark immediately offered. As long as you need, there's enough space. Thanks, Mark, Alex responded gratefully. Let's just stay for a little while. Is it okay if I stay for a couple of days until I figure out what to do next? Of course, no problem, my friend waved his hand. You'll be a guest for as long as you need. Alex felt relieved that he wouldn't literally be left on the street until he decided where he would start his new life. His friend's support was very welcome. How's the city anyway? Alex asked after a pause, referring to both their mutual friends and, possibly, Kayla. Mark understood the implicit question and answered carefully. It varies. I heard that Kayla left. As far as I know, she lived with this guy, well, with Travis, for a while, and then moved out of our city. I don't know the details, and I'm not particularly interested. Alex nodded silently, digesting what he had heard. Kayla was gone. Well, all the better. That meant the chance of running into her was zero. He felt a strange feeling. Neither joy nor great sadness, just a statement of fact. Perhaps there was some deep-seated resentment. How easily she had written him off and gone off to start a life with someone else. But Alex tried to let those thoughts go. Mark, to change the subject, began telling the latest news, which of his friends had changed jobs, who had bought a new house, what events had happened in the city. Alex listened with half an ear, mostly looking at the road. He understood that he would most likely no longer truly fit into this city. Too many things now distinguished him from the old Alex that was known here. At Mark's house, Alex settled into a small guest room. There was a couch and a closet there. Throwing his bag of things against the wall, he suddenly felt tired. Half a day on his feet, the emotional overexcitement of freedom, all this had exhausted him. Rest up, make yourself comfortable, dude, Mark said, patting him on the shoulder. There's beer in the fridge if you need it. We'll celebrate your return somehow quietly today. I'll cook some meat on the grill. Sounds great, Alex smiled weakly. That evening, they did celebrate Alex's return. Mark fired up a small grill in the backyard, and the friends grilled steaks and joked around. Alex drank ginger ale, he didn't want alcohol yet, and listened to Mark talk leisurely about his recent fishing trip. The air smelled of smoke and spice, and crickets chirped. Alex suddenly felt at peace. A week ago, he was sitting behind a locked door in his hospital room, and now he was talking to a friend in the open air. After dinner, they sat for a long time, looking at the stars. Mark told funny stories about mutual friends, and Alex even laughed a couple of times sincerely from the heart. Mark, noticing this, patted him on the shoulder and said, "This is how I missed you alive and cheerful. Everything will be fine, my friend." Alex just nodded, feeling enormous gratitude to his friend. Left alone, he looked around the room. Dust motes swirled in the afternoon sun. Alex sat down on the couch, resting his elbows on his knees. He felt a little uneasy. Here he was, free. He had to decide something, move on. But he seemed to have no strength. The doctor had said that adaptation would take time. He himself understood that everything would not get better right away. He pulled his wedding ring out of his pocket and turned it over in his fingers. It was strange that he still wore it. It was probably just habit. Alex looked thoughtfully at the gold ring, a symbol of the promises he and Kayla had made to each other. Now those promises meant nothing. He felt a surge of determination. It was time to finally close this chapter of his life. And first, he had to take off the ring. Alex slowly pulled the wedding ring off his ring finger. It left a faint light mark on his skin. He clutched the ring in his fist. His heart was beating faster than usual, as if he was daring to do something important and scary at the same time. Finally, he opened his palm and put the ring back in his pocket. Never mind, I'll get rid of it soon, he thought. But first, the idea that had been conceived during the last therapy sessions had now taken its final shape. Alex remembered Dr. Miller's words about letting go and not seeking revenge. He had no intention of doing anything dangerous. But would a small, harmless joke interfere with his healing? Quite the opposite, it would help put an end to it. The idea seemed silly, childish, but the more he thought about it, the more he smiled to himself. He wanted some kind of symbolic act to mark the end of this story for himself, and he already knew what he would do. Late in the evening, after making sure that Mark had already gone to bed, Alex quietly crept out of the house. In his jacket pocket were two objects: a folded plastic bag with unpleasant contents and a small homemade flag. On a white rectangle of paper, one word was written in black marker: closure. That afternoon, Alex put his plan into action. When Mark went away for an hour on business, Alex took his gloves and a bag from the garage and headed to the nearest park. He was lucky. On the lawn by the path, he quickly found what he was looking for: fresh dog waste that one of the owners had been too lazy to clean up. With a wincing grimace but firm determination, he turned the bag inside out, picked up the sticky brown lump, and wrapped it up. The catch was unpleasant, but the plan was coming to fruition. At home, he attached a paper flag to a wooden toothpick and prepared everything for the evening. It was a dark night now, clouds covering the moon. Alex walked down an empty street toward his former home. The silence of a sleeping suburb hung all around, only cars occasionally passing in the distance. Alex pulled up the hood of his jacket, although he knew that hardly anyone would be looking out the windows at this time of night. Approaching the familiar courtyard, he stopped in the shade of a tree. His heart was pounding in his chest. The house seemed empty, there were no lights on anywhere. Perhaps Kayla really was gone. But Alex decided to finish the job, even if the recipients weren't home. He ran across the path and up the porch. A thought flashed through his head. What if the alarm goes off now or the neighbors notice? But everything was quiet. Alex took the package out of his pocket. He carefully removed the foul-smelling lump from it and placed it right in the middle of the doormat. Then he carefully stuck a toothpick with a flag into it. The white paper stuck out precariously from the dark mass. The word on it was barely visible in the darkness. But Alex knew what was written there. He straightened up and looked at his creation for a few seconds. Conflicting feelings fought in his chest, from disgust at himself for this childishness to an angry satisfaction. Closure, completion, closing of a gestalt, as psychologists say. Well, that's exactly what he did. He put a symbolic end. A dog barked somewhere nearby, and Alex flinched. Suddenly, a door slammed in the neighboring house. Someone came out onto the porch with a flashlight. Alex recoiled into the darkness, holding his breath. The moonlight slid across his jacket, and he froze, trying to blend into the shadows of the bushes. The neighbor's dog, probably the one that had been yapping, barked again. The neighbor's irritated voice was heard. "What's going on?" "Quiet, Buster." A moment later, the door closed again, and the darkness returned. It was time to go. He jumped off the porch and walked quickly away, passing the familiar mailbox with the faded name Rivers. Perhaps tomorrow morning the new owner of the house, or Kayla herself, if she still came here, would find an unpleasant surprise. Alex imagined the disgusted look on the face of anyone who saw it, and for the first time in a long time, he laughed softly. Funny and a little nasty, just as he had intended. Back at Mark's house, Alex slipped silently into his room. He carefully hid the remaining empty bag in the trash, disposing of the evidence, and lay down on the couch. For the first time in a long time, his soul felt surprisingly light. This stupid prank did not fix the past, but it gave him a sense of relief. Alex smiled in the darkness. It seemed that now he could really let go of the situation. The next day, Alex carried out the second part of his plan, a final farewell to the past. After lunch, he went to the city center, where on the main street there was a pawn shop with a sign, Pawn and Purchase. A thin layer of snow crunched under his feet. Winter was coming into its own, and the frost nipped at his face. Alex wrapped himself tighter in his scarf, entering the warm premises of the pawnshop. An elderly man in glasses sat behind the counter, reading a newspaper. Hearing the ringing of the doorbell, he put down his reading and looked at Alex with a narrowed gaze. "Good afternoon. How can I help you?" Alex took his wedding ring out of his pocket and placed it on the velvet cushion on the counter. "I would like to sell a ring. Gold, 14 carats. The old man looked critically at the worn ring, picked up a magnifying glass, and carefully examined the inside. The wedding date was engraved there. Alex briefly noticed how the shop owner squinted, examining the numbers. "The hallmark is 585, he muttered. I can offer you $100. "100? Alex asked, feeling disappointed. The ring had once been worth much more, but he quickly pulled himself together. "Okay, let's get this over with." The salesman had apparently expected a bargain and was even a little surprised that the customer had agreed so easily. He shrugged and took a $100 bill from the cash register, handing it to Alex along with a receipt for him to sign. Alex signed it without reading it and put the money in his pocket. When he left the pawn shop, his heart was a little heavy after all. This thing was a part of his life, a symbol of once happy days. But at the same time, he felt relief. Another thread connecting him with Kayla was broken. When Alex returned home, he found that Mark had already come home from work. He was standing in the kitchen, making coffee. "Frozen as a puppy," Mark complained when he saw Alex. "There's a real frost coming." "How was it?" "Everything's fine," Alex answered evasively. He didn't talk about selling the ring. Mark already knew that his friend was having a hard time with money. "Listen, Mark, I thought about something. I'll probably leave tomorrow." Mark, who was stirring sugar in a mug, turned around. "Where are you going?" "I don't even know," Alex answered honestly. "I just want a change of scenery. Travel around the country, get some fresh air. I need time to think it all over and decide what to do next." Mark put down his spoon with a worried look. "Are you sure? Maybe it's too early to start traveling. You don't really have anything. No work, no plan." Alex smiled with the corner of his lips. "That's exactly it. There's nothing. So, there's nothing to lose. And work. You know, it's difficult with my reputation now. Especially in our town. Everyone knows everything. And somewhere on the other side of the country, I can just be a no-name with a clean slate." Mark shook his head, but didn't argue. He understood Alex's logic. "Okay, if you decided, then it must be so. When are you leaving? I'll help you pack everything." "I'll be moving tomorrow morning," Alex said, sipping the hot coffee that Mark had poured for him. He glanced around the kitchen, where he and his friend had spent many evenings. He was a little sad to leave, but he didn't want to hang around Mark's neck any longer. And really, he wanted to get as far away from here as possible. They spent the rest of the evening poring over a map of the United States that Mark had found online and opened on his laptop. Alex was plotting a route. He wanted to head west first. He didn't plan any exact points, rather, he'd go with the flow. But he chose the Pacific Ocean as his final destination. "I always dreamed of seeing the ocean," he admitted quietly. "I've seen the sea, but not the Pacific Ocean." Mark chuckled approvingly. "Well, the ocean is cool. So, the California coast, Los Angeles, San Francisco, maybe San Diego," Alex shrugged. They say it's beautiful there and life isn't as hectic as in Los Angeles. Well, why not? When you get there, be sure to let me know, do you hear? Mark looked at him seriously. Alex nodded. Of course, and thank you. For everything. The next morning, they hugged goodbye at the bus station. Mark thrust a couple of crumpled bills into Alex's hand. Take it for a rainy day. Don't argue, it will come in handy. And take care of yourself. Alex accepted the money, feeling a lump in his throat. Thanks, friend. I'll be in touch. He threw his backpack over his back, practically the only luggage he had. Everything fit in it. A few t-shirts, a warm sweater, a change of clothes, documents, a couple of books, and a sleeping bag tied to the bottom. Alex climbed the steps into the bus, waving to Mark as he left. The doors closed, and a minute later the bus started moving, taking him away to meet the unknown. Alex leaned against the window, watching the streets of the city that had once been his home. Perhaps he was leaving forever, but there was almost no sadness, only excitement and a strange relief. Life was rolling along new rails, and the past was left further and further behind with each passing minute. The bus sped west across the vast American expanses. Fields and sparse forest belts floated past the window. Signs with the names of small towns flashed by. Alex sat by the window, his jacket under his head. Music played softly in his headphones. He listened to old rock ballads, occasionally glancing at the changing landscape. At first, there was no one in the seat next to her, but at one of the stops, an elderly woman with two large bags got on the half-empty bus. She climbed the steps with difficulty, and Alex stood up to help her carry the luggage. "Thank you, dear," she said, sitting down next to him. They rode in silence for about 10 minutes. The old woman took knitting out of her bag and began to quietly weave a scarf. Alex closed his eyes, thinking about nothing, enjoying the measured swaying. But soon his fellow traveler started the conversation herself. "Are you going far, son?" Alex took off his headphones. "Quite far. I want to get to the Pacific Ocean." Wow, the woman was surprised. "My late husband was a naval officer. He always dreamed of seeing the Pacific Ocean. And now I'm going to visit my daughter in Oklahoma. I'll see my granddaughter. You're not a military man by any chance?" Alex shook his head with a smile. "No, I'm just traveling. I decided to change my life." "Well, that's right," nodded the fellow traveler. "In youth, you need to see the world and find yourself. But here I am, all my life in one place, only now in my old age I have left, and not for long." She took out a sandwich in foil and, unwrapping it, handed half to Alex. "Help yourself, because the food on the road is not tasty." Alex hesitated at first, but then accepted the treat. "Thanks a lot." He was really hungry, but he saved money and didn't buy anything at the stops except water. The homemade sandwich with ham and pickles seemed incredibly tasty to him. So they whiled away the time, exchanging phrases. The old lady told him about her town, showed him photos of her granddaughter. Alex listened politely, telling only the most general things about himself, that he was moving from his home state to California, that he used to work in an office, but decided to change everything. He did not go into details. There was no point in burdening the kind woman with his drama. When her stop came, Alex helped her carry out the bags again. They said goodbye, and Grandma, waving her hand cheerfully in farewell, said, "Good luck to you, boy. May your ocean be what you expect it to be." Alex smiled. "Thank you. All the best to you." The bus moved on. The cabin was almost empty. A few passengers remained, some dozing, some watching a movie on a laptop in the last rows. Alex stared out the window again. The landscape gradually changed. Plains gave way to hills, blue silhouettes of mountains appeared in the distance. He tried to remember the geography. It seemed that these were already the foothills of the Rocky Mountains. Somewhere around sunset, the bus stopped in a small town. The driver announced a 30-minute stop. Alex got out to stretch his legs. Several trucks were parked in a row at a roadside café. Their drivers were also resting. The café smelled of fried onions and coffee. Alex's stomach was growling, but he limited himself to a cup of cheap filter coffee for $1, which he bought inside. He had to be careful with money. He roughly estimated the budget. After buying a ticket and small expenses, he had about $50 left, and there were still at least 1,000 miles of travel ahead. Back on the bus, Alex thought about it. He would probably have to hitchhike part of the way or work part-time along the way. The idea of hitchhiking scared him a little. You never know who you might run into. But on the other hand, thousands of people travel this way. He remembered the stories of one acquaintance in his youth, how he traveled across the entire country with a backpack clinging to rides. In the evening, the bus arrived in a major hub city, Denver, Colorado. There was no direct service further west that day, and he had to either wait for the morning bus or look for other options. The bus station was bustling with people arriving and others leaving. Alex sat on a bench, watching the people scurrying about. He didn't fancy staying the night in the waiting room, so he made a decision: try his luck on the road. He stood up and headed toward the highway that led west out of town. It was already dark, but the streetlights along the highway illuminated the way. Alex walked to the edge of town, where the interstate began. He found a convenient spot near the exit ramp, where cars slowed down before entering. For the first time in his life, he raised his hand with his thumb extended, mimicking the hitchhiker's gesture. His heart was pounding. What if they didn't stop? Or, on the contrary, someone dangerous would stop. But it was too late to back out. Cars sped past, the drivers either not noticing him in the darkness or choosing not to stop. About 20 minutes passed. Alex was already starting to feel cold and disappointed when suddenly the hazard lights started flashing ahead. A truck on the side of the road slowed down and stopped about 30 meters ahead. Alex grabbed his backpack and ran to the truck's cabin. A man in a baseball cap leaned out the open window. "Where are you heading?" he shouted in a bass voice. "As west as possible," Alex replied, catching his breath. "Well, jump in. I'll give you a lift to Salt Lake City." The driver waved his hand. Alex smiled with relief as he climbed into the tall cab. The door slammed shut, and the truck picked up speed as it sped down the highway into the night. A new stage of his journey was about to begin. The truck cabin was warm and smoky. The driver introduced himself as Bill, a stocky man in his 40s with a thick mustache and a playful squint. He extended a large, calloused hand to Alex. "Call me Bill. What's yours?" "Alex," he replied, shaking the driver's hand. The truck pulled out onto the highway, its engine humming steadily. Bill was driving with one hand, and with the other he reached for the radio. Turning down the music, it was playing some country rock. "Well, Alex, if you're going west, that means you're looking for adventure. Are you studying or working?" Alex shook his head. "No, rather, I'm moving away from my old life." Bill chuckled knowingly. "Oh, it happens. I also once rushed off on a trip to get away from home. My wife left me then. Can you imagine?" Alex turned his head in surprise. "Seriously, I have. Well, a similar story." "Oh, women." Bill shook his head, then glanced sideways at Alex. "Well, hold on, brother. You survived somehow, didn't you? You seemed pretty cheerful." Alex chuckled. "It's already better than it was. It got easier on the road, you know." "That's true," Bill agreed. "The road heals. I've tested it. I remember then, after the divorce, straight from court into a truck and on a trip for 2 weeks. When I came back, my head was already clearer. Since then, I've been riding. I like it. Freedom. No one's bothering me. I'm on my own." He took a flask out of his pocket, took a sip, and offered it to Alex. "Will you? A little whiskey to warm you up." Alex politely declined. "Thank you, I don't feel like it." He was wary of alcohol after his treatment. Bill shrugged and put the canteen away. A leisurely conversation ensued. Bill talked about his job, hauling grain from Nebraska to Oregon, sometimes trucks from California to the east. He had a dog at home and an elderly mother whom he visited between trips. He joked that his home was this truck, patting the dashboard. Alex relaxed little by little. Other people's stories distracted him from his own thoughts. They drove through the night without stopping. Bill seemed accustomed to long drives. Towards morning, when the sky in the east was just beginning to lighten, the truck turned into a parking lot. Let's have a smoke and a bite to eat, Bill announced, wiping his eyes. The old man is getting tired. They stopped at a large roadside truck stop. The truck stop had a vintage sign reading Red Diner and smelled of coffee and fried bacon. Bill sat Alex down at a table and insisted on buying him breakfast. Don't argue, I'll give you a ride to Salt Lake, so I won't remain in debt. Alex nodded gratefully. He was indeed hungry. They ordered ham and eggs, toast, and a large mug of coffee. While they were waiting for their order, Bill asked, "Well, where to next? How will you get there?" "The Pacific Ocean, that's the general direction, but more specifically." "I think California," Alex replied. "Maybe San Diego, I'm not sure yet. I want to live by the sea for a while." "San Diego is a good choice," Bill approved. "The city is big, but relatively quiet. I've been there a couple of times. The climate is great, the ocean is beautiful. True, housing is a bit expensive, but I understand you're traveling light." Alex chuckled. "Lightly is not the word. I have all my belongings with me. I have almost no money. I'll have to work somewhere on the spot." Bill slapped his hand on the table. "Yes, you will earn it. It will come with time. You are a smart man. Look where you have already reached. I can vouch for you. If you were able to not drink whiskey with me here and endure the truck until the morning, it means you have a backbone." He laughed. Breakfast arrived, and they ate in silence for a while, enjoying the hot food. Alex suddenly realized that he felt almost happy at that moment. He was sitting in a roadside diner somewhere in Utah, drinking strong coffee, the unknown ahead, and this did not frighten him, but beckoned him. "If you need a job, look at the long-haul truck driver," Bill suddenly said, wiping his mouth with a napkin. "People are always needed. Go to school, get your license, and hit the road. The work, of course, is not easy, but the pay is bearable. You will see the world." Alex answered thoughtfully. Never thought about it. Maybe. Thanks for the advice." After paying, they returned to the truck. Bill gave Alex a place on the top bunk in the cabin's sleeping section so that he could take a short nap, and he himself said that he would rest for another hour at the table. Alex climbed onto the bunk, covered himself with his jacket, and almost immediately fell into a short but deep sleep. He woke up when the car started moving. Rubbing his eyes, Alex looked out. It was a bright morning outside the windows. The sun was illuminating the snowy mountain peaks in the distance. Bill, holding the steering wheel, was humming a song from the radio in a low voice. Seeing Alex climb down from the shelf, he smiled. "Good morning again. Did you sleep well? We'll get to Salt Lake City in about 4 hours now." The rest of the way they discussed music, shared funny stories from their lives. Bill told jokes about truck drivers. Alex even laughed for the first time so heartily in many months. He felt at ease with this simple, kind man who did not demand anything from him and did not judge. As we approached Salt Lake City, Bill asked, "Well, should I give you a lift straight to the bus station or where you get off?" "It would be great if it went to the city center," Alex replied. He hadn't yet decided whether he would continue trying to catch rides or save the rest of his money for a bus. As the truck entered the city limits, Alex couldn't help but admire the views. Wide, clean streets, mountains on the horizon. Bill parked in a parking lot near a large shopping center not far from the center. "I can't go any further," he said. "It will be easier for you here." Alex jumped to the ground, then extended his hand to Bill through the open window of the cabin. "Thank you. You, Bill, thank you very much. You helped me a lot." Bill shook his hand firmly. "Don't worry about it. Take care of yourself, Alex. Everything will be fine, you hear? Any devilry ends sooner or later. Be a man, don't be sad. Good luck to you." Alex's eyes suddenly stung. He nodded, taking a step back and lowering his hand. "Good luck to you too. Have a nice trip." Bill waved goodbye and pulled away. Alex stood there for a few minutes, watching the huge trailer pull out onto the road and merge into the traffic. When it disappeared from sight, Alex felt both the sadness of parting and gratitude for the meeting. He picked up his backpack and took a deep breath of the cool air. It was time to move on to meet his new life. Salt Lake City greeted Alex with a clear day and an icy wind. A few blocks from the parking lot, he found himself in a lively area. Several brightly painted vans were already lined up on the street, with delicious smoke coming from them. This was the food truck zone mobile snack bars, and although it was still morning, some of them were open to sell coffee and sandwiches. Alex wandered between the food trucks, wondering what to do next. One truck, adorned with a picture of a taco in a sombrero, said Miguel's Tacos. There was no one around, but the hood was up, and loud muttering in Spanish was coming from underneath. Alex stopped nearby, listening. It sounded like the owner was having engine trouble. He peered around the corner of the van and saw a middle-aged man with a dark mustache leaning over the engine, cursing under his breath. A younger woman stood next to him, holding a phone with a flashlight on. "Excuse me, are you in trouble?" Alex asked politely, coming closer. The man straightened up, wiping his hands with a rag. "Well, the damn carburetor is acting up," he answered with an accent. "Are you a mechanic?" "No, but I can help hold it or hand over the instrument," Alex responded. "That would be nice, amigo," the owner sighed. "Rose, shine a light for him." The woman handed Alex a phone with a flashlight, introducing herself. "I'm Rosa, and this is Miguel. We're getting ready for the festival, and our old horse has started acting up. Alex, nice to meet you. Let's see." He shone a light inside the hood. Miguel was digging around in the wiring, tweaking something. Alex didn't know much about engines, but he tried to help as much as he could. After half an hour of fiddling, the engine finally coughed and started. "Oh, glory be to Saint Mary," Miguel exclaimed, wiping his sweaty forehead. "Thanks, man. We were thinking of calling a tow truck." "Glad to help," Alex smiled. He was about to take his leave, but Rose, casting an appraising glance at him, suddenly asked, "Are you, by any chance, looking for a job?" Alex was taken aback by the directness of the question. Uh, Actually, yes, in search." "Why?" Miguel nodded to Rosa and turned to Alex. "You see, we have a big street food festival in San Diego tomorrow. We're leaving tonight, and our assistant suddenly came down with appendicitis. There's no one to fry the meat and take the orders. You seem smart, and you're handy. You helped us, even though you're not a mechanic. Maybe you want to come with us. Help out at the festival for a couple of days, and we'll feed you, take you to California, and pay you a little." Alex couldn't believe his luck. Just like that, work and a trip to the ocean. Of course, with pleasure, he blurted out. "I learn quickly. True, I haven't worked with food before, but I'll catch on." Rose smiled. "Excellent. We pay a little $50 a day and our food. Plus, we'll give you a ride wherever you say along the way." "That will suit me," Alex nodded, internally rejoicing. Now he would have something to do and a way to reach his goal. So he became a temporary employee of Miguel's Tacos. Alex spent the rest of the day helping Miguel and Rosa buy groceries. They loaded the van with boxes of vegetables, meat, spices. It turned out that Miguel is the head of a small family business, and Rosa is his niece, a student working for her uncle during the holidays. They go to big food festivals in different states every year. San Diego was the next stop, after which they planned to return home. Alex quickly mastered the basics, chopping vegetables, heating tortillas, assembling tacos according to the recipe. In the evening, when the preparations were finished, the three of them had dinner right next to the van, trying freshly made tacos al pastor. For Alex, this was an unusual food, spicy, juicy, and he ate with appetite, accompanied by friendly jokes from his new acquaintances. "Look, the guy likes it," Miguel laughed, watching Alex gobble up his second taco. "You'll be trying to persuade customers like that tomorrow." Alex wiped the sauce off his chin. "If they are as tasty as they are, you won't have to persuade them much." Rose winked. The right attitude. As night approached, Miguel decided to set off in order to cover most of the distance by morning. Alex settled down in the back of the truck on sacks of flour, covering them with a sleeping bag. It wasn't very comfortable, but he was filled with anticipation. The van started moving, heading south out of the city. The lights of evening Salt Lake floated past the window, then the darkness of the highway stretched out. Miguel was quietly humming a Mexican song to the radio at the wheel. Rosa had long since dozed off in the passenger seat, covered with a jacket. Alex, however, was not asleep. He sat up and peered through the window into the cabin. The night desert stretched out around the van. In the distance, on the horizon, the lights of a large city, probably Las Vegas, twinkled, coloring the sky with reflections. Myriads of stars hung above the highway, brighter than Alex had ever seen at home. The dry desert air made the night sky especially transparent. He looked at the stars, at the occasional lights of roadside motels, and felt a quiet happiness that he was now driving through the night to his new life. Alex, in the pitch-black back of the truck, smiled. He was on the road again, and this time he knew for sure that he would soon see the ocean. Early in the morning, the van entered California. Alex woke up to the sun shining through the cracks and brightly illuminating the sacks of provisions. After stretching his numb legs a bit, he looked out the window of the cab. On both sides of the road stretched desert landscapes, but ahead he could already vaguely discern the outlines of a city. They reached San Diego around midday. Everything was new to Alex. Tall palm trees lining the streets, endless blue skies, a gentle sea breeze that brought coolness even in the heat. The van made its way through the city to a park by the coast, where a street food festival was taking place. Everywhere there was a bustle, dozens of colorful tents and vans lined up in rows, people hauling boxes, plugging in electric generators. Miguel parked in the designated spot. Not 5 minutes had passed when the festival coordinator approached them with documents, and Rosa began to fill out the paperwork. Meanwhile, Alex helped Miguel open the side of the van, turning it into a counter, and connected the gas cylinder to the grill. The sun was already baking, promising a hot day. "Okay, we open in an hour," Miguel commanded. "Alex, will you fry the meat? Can you handle it?" "I think so," he replied, feeling a little nervous. He was given an apron with the Miguel's Tacos logo and gloves. Rosa took her place at the cash register. Miguel supervised the process and periodically called out to passing people with a cheerful shout. Authentic tacos, very delicious. Gradually, the festival came alive. The music started playing, the first visitors began to arrive. At first cautiously, then more and more boldly, people approached their van, attracted by the appetizing smell of marinated pork on the grill. Alex concentrated on frying, thinly slicing the meat from the spit al pastor, browning it in a frying pan along with pineapple and onions. The work went well, although sweat poured down. He served the finished filling to Rosa, who deftly laid everything out on warm corn tortillas and generously sprinkled with cilantro. "3 tacos al pastor," Rosa called out, handing the paper tray to the man in the Hawaiian shirt. "Here, 2 barbacoas," Miguel distracted, checking another order. The line at the truck grew. Alex struggled to keep up with the grill. His hands ached from the unfamiliar work. His face was hot, but he felt excited. Customers walked away with satisfied expressions, enjoying their tacos. A few even came back to praise the food and buy more. "What a rush," Alex smiled, catching his breath during a short break between orders. "Yeah, great day," Rose confirmed, wiping sweat from her forehead. "You're doing great, like you always did this." Alex laughed. "I didn't expect that I could handle it." By evening, when the flow of customers had died down, they had almost nothing left of their supplies. Everything had been sold. Miguel was counting the proceeds, smoking contentedly at the back door of the van. A girl from the neighboring lemonade van came up and handed them 3 paper cups of cold raspberry lemonade. "This is for you, the neighbors, to relax," she smiled. Rosa accepted the treat gratefully and immediately handed 1 glass to Alex. The lemonade was tart and sweet, the best thing you can imagine after a hot day. Alex drank it in large gulps and felt his strength returning. Rose handed the exhausted but happy Alex a bottle of cold water. "Drink, amigo." That was cool. Alex downed half the bottle in 1 gulp. His legs were buzzing, and he sat down right on the curb next to the van. The other vendors were gradually gathering around him. There was laughter, and here and there music. The festival was ending on a cheerful, informal note. "Here you go, boy, you earned it." Miguel clapped Alex on the shoulder, handing him a few bills. "This is even more than they promised. $150. You did a great job. You helped us out." "Thank you." Alex accepted the money. It was significantly more than he had expected. He felt proud of a job well done. "If you ever decide to make a career in the taco world, contact me," Miguel joked. "We're heading home tomorrow. What are you planning?" Alex looked around. A strip of ocean was visible beyond the trees of the park, golden in the rays of the setting sun. He stood up and walked slowly to the edge of the embankment. Miguel and Rosa followed him. A stunning picture opened up before them, the boundless Pacific Ocean, its waves gently rolling onto the beach. Alex watched without looking away. He had finally reached his goal. He saw the ocean. They stood in silence for a while, enjoying the cool breeze. Finally, Alex said quietly, "I think I'll stay here in San Diego, at least for a while. Try to settle down, find a job." Miguel nodded understandingly. "Right, this place is good. By the way, I have a friend who runs a small Mex cafe in La Jolla on the coast. Want me to put in a good word? He's always happy to see workers, especially those with festival experience, haha." "That would be great," Alex perked up. "Thank you very much, Miguel." They agreed that Miguel would contact a friend the next morning and take Alex to the meeting. That evening, Alex pitched a tent borrowed by Rosa right on the beach among the other festival guests who had decided to spend the night in the open air. He walked for a long time right along the edge of the surf, letting the cool waves wash his bare feet. Soon, a trembling moonlit path lit up the dark surface of the ocean. He thought about how much had happened in the past year. A year ago at this time, he was an unhappy, deceived husband in a cold house, and now he was sitting by the ocean, free and full of quiet joy. The pain of loss had almost subsided, only a faint scar remained on his heart. That night he slept, catching in the sound of the surf something like a lullaby, and for the first time in a long time he had a good dream, as if he was floating on the waves, and on the shore new friends and a new life were waiting for him. The next morning, as agreed, Miguel drove Alex to a small cafe in the La Jolla area, not far from the ocean. The cafe was called El Mar and specialized in Cali-Mex cuisine. This was indicated on the sign. There were a couple of tables inside, and one window looked directly onto the street for the food truck format you could order to go. "Carlos," Miguel barked as he walked inside. "Where are you, old pirate?" A short, strong man of about 50 with a beard and a bright Hawaiian shirt came out of the back room. Seeing the guests, he broke into a smile. "Miguel, brother, what brings you here?" They hugged each other warmly. Miguel nodded towards Alex. "Well, I brought you a smart worker. Remember, I said we needed someone for the kitchen." Carlos looked Alex up and down. "This guy got me out of the festival yesterday," Miguel continued. "We couldn't have done it without him." "Oh, come on, I was just helping," Alex said, embarrassed. "My name is Alex," he introduced himself, extending his hand to Carlos. "Carlos Alvarez, the owner of this modest establishment," he replied, shaking his hand. "I trust Miguel, so if he praises me, we'll try to work together. Do you have experience? What can you do?" "I'm a fast learner," Alex replied. "Yesterday I learned how to make tacos al pastor on the go. I used to work more with paperwork, but now I'm ready for any job." Carlos raised an eyebrow. "With paperwork? White collar, huh?" He grinned, but without malice. "Okay, you'll help in the kitchen. Peel, cut, wash, sometimes serve. We'll pay $15 an hour, plus meals and tips we'll split. Does that suit you?" "Quite," Alex nodded, internally rejoicing. He would now have a stable income. "Then come on in right now," Carlos gestured to the counter. "Meet our team." A girl in a t-shirt with the cafe's logo was busy behind the counter near the coffee machine. She turned at Carlos's voice. Alex noticed her open smile and clear gray blue eyes. "This is Emma, our coffee master and cashier at the same time, Carlos introduced her. Emma, this is Alex, the new assistant. Hello, Alex, she said cheerfully, removing her glove and extending her hand to him. Welcome to our crazy circus. Alex smiled and shook her hand. Nice to meet you. Madness is my thing. Emma laughed briefly. Carlos was already patting Miguel on the shoulder goodbye. Miguel hugged Alex again. Good luck to you, amigo. Stop by if you happen to be passing through. Thanks for your help. And thank you for everything, Alex replied. Have a nice trip. When Miguel left, Alex felt a little out of place at first. But Emma and Carlos immediately put him to work. They gave him a clean apron and showed him where everything was. It turned out that the morning rush had passed, and now it was relatively quiet. Emma made him a cup of latte, explaining, You can't go anywhere without coffee here. Get used to it. I brew the strongest one in the mornings. Alex gratefully accepted the hot glass. Thank you. Very timely. Work began closer to midday. Orders for burritos, quesadillas, and takeout coffee began pouring in. Alex diligently carried out his orders. He chopped vegetables, heated tortillas on the grill, and made sure the sauces were filled. Carlos, seeing his efficiency, chuckled contentedly. Emma periodically encouraged him. You cut great. Are you sure you haven't worked as a cook before? Alex shook his head and smiled. He himself surprisingly enjoyed this simple task, cooking food, and immediately seeing the results of his labors. In the middle of the lunch hour, a small incident occurred. One of the customers, a respectable man in a business suit, grumbled discontentedly that the wait for his order was too long. Emma tried to calm him down, explaining that there were a lot of customers at the moment, but the man continued to loudly complain. Alex, hearing the noise, came out from behind the counter himself. He politely apologized to the customer and promised to rectify the situation. Having quickly wrapped his burrito, Alex added a free dessert to the order, crispy churros with cinnamon. As an apology for the wait, he said calmly. The customer softened, muttered something about okay, and accepted the treat. After he left, Emma whispered praise to Alex. Well done, brother. After dinner, the flood subsided, and they were able to catch their breath. Emma sat down at the table, stretching out her legs. Phew, I love my job, but sometimes in the evenings my legs just fall off. Alex was just washing the dishes and responded. I know, yesterday at the festival I could barely stand by the end. It's okay, he gets used to it. Were you at the festival yesterday? She asked with interest. He briefly told how he ended up at Miguel's food truck, though he left out the details of his backstory. Emma listened with keen interest. Sounds great traveling across half the country, festivals. I myself dream of traveling around the USA without a plan someday. Carlos went to the warehouse, and he and Emma had a few minutes to chat. She told him that she was studying design at a local college and that she worked here part-time in the mornings. She lived nearby in a rented apartment with a friend and loved surfing. Alex shared that this was his first time in San Diego and that he already liked the city. He mentioned that he was living in a tent for now and that he would need to find a place to live. In a tent? Emma gasped, but there was a twinkle in her eyes. You're something. Listen, our neighbor just moved out recently. If you want, I can ask the landlady if she'll rent you a room. The house is old, but it's a 15-minute walk to the beach. Alex was even taken aback by such goodwill. Seriously? That would be great, really. Hostels are expensive, and there's nowhere to stay right now. I'll talk to Mrs. Lopez this evening, Emma promised. I don't think she'll mind. You seem like a reliable guy. Thank you, Emma, Alex said sincerely. You're a big help. Oh, come on, she waved it off. We're all our own here. So Alex not only had a job, but also hope of finding a place to stay. That evening, after closing the cafe, he returned to his temporary camp on the beach in high spirits. Carlos was pleased with his first day, and Emma said she would talk to the landlady about a room. Alex, sitting by the tent under the starry sky, felt that life was getting better. For the first time in a long time, he had a plan for tomorrow, a job, and even new acquaintances with whom it was pleasant to communicate. 2 days later, everything was sorted out with housing. Mrs. Lopez, an elderly Mexican woman, the owner of a small house where Emma lived with her friend, agreed to rent the third room to Alex for a modest fee. Alex moved from the tent to the roof. The room was small, with a bed and a closet, but it suited him more than well. He laid out all his belongings in a couple of minutes. Having calculated the budget, Alex realized that for the time being his salary would be enough for food and rent, although without excesses. On the first evening after moving in, Mrs. Lopez invited the new tenant to the communal kitchen for a housewarming party. She prepared her signature stew and homemade tacos, and sat Alex, Emma, and her friend at a round table. Over dinner, it turned out that Senora Lopez loved to talk. She asked Alex about his hometown, complained about arthritis, and bragged about his grandchildren. Alex ate with appetite, politely answering questions. He felt warm and cozy among these simple people. He went home well-fed and contented, feeling almost like a member of their little family. Every day he woke up early in the morning in his new room, drank coffee, quickly ate oatmeal, and went to work. Bustling but cheerful hours awaited him at the café. He quickly got into the swing of things. He knew all the regulars by name, smiled when he watched Emma chat casually with visitors, learned how to make the signature pico de gallo sauce and fry crispy churros for dessert. Time flew by, and most importantly, Alex felt needed and calm. No heavy thoughts about the past. By the evening he was exhausted and thought only about getting enough sleep before a new day. Time passed. Several months flew by unnoticed, and new habits took hold in Alex's measured life. A cafe in the morning, work in the afternoon, and a run along the embankment or a get-together with his neighbors in the evening. Emma became a good friend to him. They talked a lot at work, and in the evenings they sometimes cooked dinner together in the shared kitchen of Mrs. Lopez's house. Gradually, Alex found himself impatiently awaiting every opportunity to spend time with her. One weekend morning, Emma knocked on his door. "Alex, look outside, it's a perfect day for surfing. Will you come with me?" She stood on the threshold in shorts and a t-shirt with a board under her arm, beaming. Alex, taken aback, hesitated. "I have never tried. I'm afraid I'll drown right away." Emma waved her hand. "Nonsense. I'll teach you in shallow water. I have a spare board. Don't worry." An hour later, they were already on the beach in La Jolla. Emma gave a short briefing on the shore, showing how to stand up on the board. Alex tried to imitate, falling on the sand, which made her laugh infectiously. "Well, you're not a natural surfer, of course," she joked, "but it's okay, we'll teach you." Wading into the water up to his waist, Alex climbed onto the board with difficulty and tried to catch his first wave. It didn't work out very well. The board went forward, he couldn't hold on, and flew into the water with a splash. Surfacing, snorting, he saw that Emma had also fallen nearby and was laughing infectiously. Great jump, again. Over the course of an hour, he tried unsuccessfully to stand up on the board several times, but each time he ended up swimming. Eventually, they got out on the shore to rest. Alex was lying on the warm sand, out of breath from laughter and fatigue. Well, I'm sorry, I'm a hopeless student." Emma patted him on the shoulder. "Come on, it's okay for the first time. But you see, it's fun." They laid out towels and settled down under an umbrella. Emma took a bottle of lemonade from her bag and offered it to Alex. Sipping the cool drink, they chatted about everything under the sun. Emma talked about her childhood in San Diego, how her father took her fishing, how her mother taught her to swim at the age of 3. Alex, looking at the ocean, unexpectedly said quietly, "But I've never seen the ocean before. A year ago, I couldn't even imagine that I would be sitting here like this." Emma turned to him, squinting slightly against the sun. "You still haven't told me how you decided to go on a trip. If it's not a secret, of course." Alex paused for a few seconds, thinking. He hadn't shared much of his past with anyone in months. But now, with Emma, whom he trusted, he wanted to be open. "It's no secret," he answered quietly. "It's just not a funny story. I had a difficult time. My wife, well, my ex-wife cheated on me. I took it really hard. I even got into a fight with that guy. Anyway, it all ended in a big scandal. The trial, the treatment. He noticed how Emma was listening attentively, without interrupting, and continued. I was sent to mandatory therapy. After that, I realized that I couldn't live the old way. I decided to leave, wherever my eyes looked. That's how I ended up here. Emma touched his hand gently. I'm sorry you had to go through that. It must have been really painful. She was silent for a couple of seconds, then quietly added, You know, I've been betrayed too. A year ago, my boyfriend, well, ex-boyfriend, was dating someone else behind my back. I thought I wouldn't survive it, but I survived it somehow. So, I understand how painful it is. Alex nodded, feeling a lump in his throat, but no longer a sharp pain, just a memory. Yes, then it seemed like life was over. But now I'm glad that everything turned out this way. Without what happened, I would never have ended up here. I wouldn't have met new people. He looked at Emma, and their eyes met. They were silent for a few moments. Finally, Emma, slightly embarrassed, smiled. Life is a strange thing, yes. Sometimes an evil turn leads you to where you need to be. Alex repeated quietly. Exactly. That evening, after they had returned home, he and Emma lingered on the porch, watching the sunset. Emma covered herself with a blanket and, after a moment, snuggled up to Alex, resting her head on his shoulder. His heart began to beat faster, but he gently hugged her. They sat there in silence until the sky extinguished the last colors of the day. I haven't felt this calm in a long time, Emma suddenly whispered. I feel good with you. Alex felt a warm wave in his chest. He turned his head towards her. I, too, feel very good with you. Emma raised her face, looking into his eyes. Alex leaned slightly and timidly touched his lips to hers. She responded with a soft kiss. At that moment, everything around them seemed to cease to exist, only the two of them and the rustle of the distant surf. After parting from the kiss, Emma quietly laughed, looking into his eyes. But the day started out like any other. Alex smiled. I think we still have many unusual days ahead. They sat on the porch for a long time, talking about all sorts of trivial things, laughing and holding hands. Alex realized that for the first time in many years he was truly happy. Not euphorically, but quietly, confidently happy next to a person he could trust and with whom he wanted to move on. Another morning in San Diego began for Alex with the gentle sunlight filtering through the curtains. He lay still for a moment, listening to the house. Mrs. Lopez's old wall clock ticking somewhere in the distance, a floorboard creaking in the neighbor's upstairs room, someone already riding a bike in the alley, the tires rustling on the rough asphalt. The smell of salt was barely perceptible, as if the ocean, hidden a block away, was breathing in time with the city. He stretched, waking up, and felt a warm presence next to him. Emma was still fast asleep, her nose buried in his shoulder, the hairs on her temples sticking up comically, and her breath tickling his skin. Some exotic birds were chirping outside the window, the freshness of the ocean and the sweet aroma of blooming bougainvillea from the yard blew through the slightly open window. Alex smiled almost boyishly. Every morning like this still felt like a gift he couldn't stop unwrapping. He carefully got out of bed, trying not to wake Emma, and tiptoed down the cool hallway to the kitchen. On the table was yesterday's newspaper, next to a note from Mrs. Lopez in her ornate handwriting. Please remember to take the cardboard out for recycling, and don't overfeed the cat. The cat, however, was already sitting next to him, silently begging for attention with his amber eyes. Alex stroked him between the ears, put the coffee on, and pulled out a box of eggs, bacon, tomatoes, and green onions from the refrigerator. In the cupboard, he found some dried thyme Carlos had taught him to season his omelets with herbs, so that the aroma sings, as he said. Today was his day off, a rare case of both of them having the same day off. He decided to make breakfast. While the pan was heating up, Alex glanced out onto the balcony. The courtyard was already flooded with sunlight. Clusters of bright pink flowers hung over the railing, and on the neighboring balcony, a short boy in pajamas was watering a cactus from a blue watering can and was very proud of it. "Good morning," he called out, noticing Alex. "Good," Alex whispered back, putting his finger to his lips and nodding toward the bedroom. While he was busy at the stove, the phone rang. It was a video call from Mark. The familiar face of his friend appeared on the screen slightly unshaven, with his usual baseball cap. A mug with the logo of his fishing club gleamed in the corner of the screen. "Hello, traveler," Mark said loudly. "How's California?" "Hey, Mark," Alex responded happily, lowering his voice. "California is great. How are you?" "Everything is the same," the friend waved it off. "I recently caught a pike perch, you would have liked it. But tell me how it was for you. Otherwise, he disappeared, started an affair, and forgot about us." Alex chuckled sheepishly, turning the bacon slices over to brown them evenly. "Well, the romance really took off. There was a lot of work. Can you imagine? Now I have a life like a normal person. Work, home, girlfriend. Everything is quiet and peaceful, and I like it." Mark sighed with exaggerated relief, making a theatrical gesture. "Finally, I'm happy for you, honestly. I was worried that you might end up a hermit. Are you serious with the girl?" Alex couldn't help but glance at the bedroom doorway, where Emma's disheveled head appeared. She had been awakened by the conversation. She smiled and waved at Mark as she passed him into the living room and winked at Alex as she disappeared into the bathroom. The noisy hiss of the shower could be heard from behind the door. "It looks like it," Alex answered his friend. "Very serious." "Good to hear, buddy," Mark said sincerely. Forgive me if I said something wrong earlier. Sometimes I blurt it out. But you did well, you got out. I'm proud of you." "Thank you," Alex replied quietly. "Really, thank you. Those are important words." There was silence for a second. Mark squinted and peered at the screen. "Listen, you look different somehow. Calm. It suits you." "I think I've learned to breathe for real for the first time in a long time," Alex chuckled. "Remember what Dr. Miller said, don't get stuck in the past, move slowly. It seems to have worked." "That doctor of yours is a smart guy," Mark approved. "Okay, I won't interfere with your omelet, otherwise it'll burn. I'll get out in the fall, though. We'll stay with you for a couple of days, catch a wave and all that." "The waves are for Emma," Alex answered, laughing. "And we'll definitely find you a fishing rod and say that there's a place for fishermen to stand here too." We agreed. In the fall. We'll call next weekend for more details. They talked a little more, exchanged news, who got married to mutual friends, who had a baby, who changed jobs, and, having agreed to call each other, said goodbye. Having finished the conversation, Alex returned to the kitchen. The coffee was already bubbling in the Turk. The house was filled with a thick aroma. The omelet was browning in the frying pan. He added tomato slices, a pinch of salt, sprinkled with green onions and thyme. At that moment, Emma, having changed into a light seraphim, stood barefoot next to him, looking over his shoulder. "Who were you chatting with?" "Yes, with an old friend, Mark," he answered, turning the omelet onto the plates with a confident movement. "By the way, he really wants to meet you. He will probably come to us in the fall." "I'll be glad to," Emma smiled. "He looks like a kind bear in the video. Should I help him sit down?" "Please take the cups and the fruit bowl." They laid out breakfast on a small balcony table. 2 plates of fluffy omelet with vegetables and cheese, crisp bacon, freshly brewed coffee in pot-bellied cups, a bowl of strawberries. Emma had brought them from the farmer's market yesterday. The cat settled down busily under the table, keeping an eye on the crumbs with his shadow. Below, under the balcony, Mrs. Lopez's sun-drenched courtyard spread out. Palm leaves rustled in the wind, the hostess herself in a wide-brimmed hat, and an apron with lemons rustled with a hose, watering a bed of basil. "Life is good," Emma said sleepily, taking a sip of coffee. "And living well is even better." Alex laughed. "That's for sure. Who would have told me a year ago that I would be sitting like this in heaven? I would have thought that this is not about me." "Your guardian angel must have been working overtime," she winked. Maybe so, Alex looked at her tenderly, although there were some people on Earth who couldn't have done without them. He covered her hand with his. Emma, understanding the hint, smiled slightly shyly and squeezed his hand gently. They ate in silence for a while. Behind the neighbor's brick wall, a guitar began to rumble. Someone was practicing three chords persistently and enthusiastically. Emma giggled, nodding at the wall. There's hope. There will be a fourth by evening. What are your plans for the day? She asked, spearing a piece of omelet with a fork. The plans are ambitious. Wash the mugs and take our time, Alex said. But seriously, we can walk to the embankment and watch the kite surfers. You promised to show me the nooks and crannies where the sea lions rise. La Jolla Cove, Emma nodded. It smells so bad sometimes that your nose begs for a vacation, but the view is awesome. And there's a truck by the pier with the best mango chili on the coast, I've checked. After breakfast, they slowly tidied up, carried the cardboard out to the recycling bins. The cat meowed indignantly, deciding that they had forgotten to take him along, and sulked on the railing. Mrs. Lopez called from below. Alex, don't forget to pick up the bins after lunch. And then, without waiting for an answer, switched to Spanish, cursing the lousy watering can, which was leaking again. Alex smiled and waved at her. They set off on foot toward the waterfront. The streets were already coming alive at this hour. Joggers with bottles of water, dogs in bright harnesses, elderly couples in Panama hats, teenagers on skateboards. Near the coffee shop on the corner, a barista had chalked a phrase on the board of the day. First coffee, then decisions. Emma stopped and took a photo of it. She was collecting such phrases for her typography project. I'll show you the selection later, she said. Alex nodded. He loved to see her eyes light up when the conversation turned to design. The boardwalk smelled of sunscreen, grilled corn, and someone's coconut-tinged perfume. A steady breeze blew off the ocean. Alex unconsciously adjusted his breathing to the sound of the waves, inhaling on the surge, exhaling on the retreat, a habit from the clinic that now worked itself out. They each bought churros from the vendor. Emma sprinkled hers with cinnamon as generously as snow and laughed when the sugar dust stuck to Alex's nose. A ball rolled out from over the parapet. A boy with curly hair froze, looking around, confused. Alex kicked the ball up and rolled it gently back. Thank you, sir, the boy called out, and his mother, wearing a sun hat, nodded her thanks. A little further down the street, a thin guy with sun-bleached hair stood by the railing, playing an old ballad on the guitar. His voice was hoarse but warm. Emma stopped to listen. Alex put a few coins in the case. Thank you, friends. The musician nodded and smiled in a very homely way. At such moments, Alex felt more and more clearly that he was part of this large, motley, warm fabric of the city. They reached the cliffs at La Jolla Cove. Sea lions crowded the ledges like sleepy monks. Some were stretched out in the sun, basking, others were arguing in low sounds, still others were lazily waddling toward the water. The smell, as Emma had warned, was strong ocean, seaweed, fish, and animals, a strong mixture. Dr. Miller's technique, Emma reminded him playfully. Alex smiled and took a few steady breaths. It works, he said. At the edge of the observation deck, an elderly couple was busily setting up folding chairs. A man, neatly dressed in a plaid shirt, asked them in broken English how to get to the path down. Emma deftly explained, showing the shortest route, and the couple, thanking him, moved on, holding hands. Alex caught himself wondering how he hadn't noticed such little things before: intertwined fingers, smiles from passers-by, the way different music simultaneously oozed from everywhere and didn't interfere. They sat down on a bench at the edge of the shade. Emma pulled out a bottle of water and handed it to Alex. He took a few sips, wiped his lips with the back of his hand. The pause was long, but not awkward. He looked at the horizon, a clear line beyond which the world seemed to breathe. The events of the past year came flooding back to him, the pain, the anger, the despair. Now it all seemed like someone else's life, or a bad dream. He suddenly found himself remembering without the usual knot in his chest, as if someone had carefully pulled out the nail that held the old pictures in place, and they fell. What are you thinking about? Emma asked, noticing his concentrated face. Alex hesitated for a second, choosing his words. Well, just, I was thinking that life is getting better. I'm glad I'm here. And also, sometimes I go back in my thoughts to where it all began, and I'm surprised that there's no more screaming inside. He paused and added, I recently found out that Kayla and Travis got married and were apparently expecting a baby. I was prepared for it to knock me down. And then I caught myself doing something strange. No pain, no resentment. Just the thought, let everything be okay for them. I spent a long time trying to figure out if I was lying to myself. It seems like I wasn't. I just let it go. Emma nodded as if she knew the answer in advance. That's freedom. Not forgetting, but letting the past become the past. You don't have to love it or hate it. You can just admit that it happened. That's all. That's right, Alex said. I even thought about that ring. It's strange I used to regret things. And now I have a photograph in my memory, not an object, but a feeling. And that's enough. I sometimes remember my past seasons too, Emma smiled wryly. At first it seemed like I'd have nothing left to build. And then suddenly a new room in the House of Life was discovered. It smelled of paint and fresh wood, and it was empty, but light, and you could choose the color of the walls. Which one would you choose now? He asked, playing along. Soft sea green, she answered without hesitation, with white trim and a huge window. We'll write it down, he smiled. Someday. They sat for a while, watching the sunbeams move on the water. Then they moved along the shore. On a small patch of land, an artist was painting a watercolor. A blue dome of sky, warm sands, tiny silhouettes of people. Emma stopped, watching the brush fill with water, the color spread across the paper. I love how watercolors flow by themselves, she said, as if you set the direction and then you trust them. Alex grinned. That's also true for life. Near the pier, they came across the mango chili truck Emma had mentioned. The owner, a man in a baseball cap, was expertly peeling ripe fruit, sprinkling it with a mixture of salt, pepper, and chili, and squirting lime. Emma barely tasted it before raising an eyebrow triumphantly. I told you so. Alex squinted against the sun and the acidity of the lime, feeling the juicy, cold juice run down his fingers, the spicy heat warming his tongue. A familiar figure appeared among the strollers. One of Elmar's regulars, an elderly Mrs. Harris, arm in arm with her granddaughter. She was happy to see him and asked if there would be that perfect pico de gallo today. Alex nodded modestly, promising that tomorrow he would chop the cilantro especially for her, just the way you like it. Emma smiled as she listened. She liked the way he built these soft human bridges, simple words, and memorization of small details. At the entrance to the pier, a guy sat down with them with a sign that said, hungry but kind. He didn't push himself. He just sat there, looking down. Emma was the first to stop. Coffee? The guy looked up, nodded sheepishly. 5 minutes later, they brought him a large hot coffee and a sandwich. He thanked them very quietly, and Alex caught something alive flashing in the depths of his eyes. And there was nothing heroic about it, just a small movement that allows you to remember what you want to be. The road took them further into the shade of a row of eucalyptus trees. There, on the grass, a family had a picnic. Colorful blankets, plastic plates, laughter. The little girl with bows tied around her neck was trying to reach the soap bubbles, and when one burst right on her nose, she was surprised at first, and then laughed so heartily that everyone around her laughed, including Alex and Emma. A little later, on the way back, they dropped into a small gallery of local authors. On the walls hung photographs of waves different, endless, broken crests, almost black water before a storm, translucent green vaults. Every wave has its own signature, said Alex. And every person, answered Emma. In the far hall, the girl at the counter, a student from their college, recognized Emma and was happy. They discussed deadlines for submitting works and the teacher who liked to organize critiques on Fridays. Alex listened with pleasure. He liked her movement in her studies, her passion, the way she sat late at night over the models, and then brought them to the café and showed him the intermediate versions. By midday, the heat had become denser, and they decided to head back. On the way, they stopped at a plant shop to buy Mrs. Lopez a new hose to replace her crappy one, and a small pot of mint. Emma wanted to grow it on the windowsill. "We'll make lemonade and add it to sauces." The shop assistant, a tall guy in a monster apron, advised them to also get some rosemary. "It's easy to grow and smells like a cottage on a hill." Alex laughed. "We'll get a cottage in a pot." The house greeted them with coolness. Mrs. Lopez was sitting in the kitchen, shelling corn. She looked up at them, looked appraisingly at the hose, and nodded contentedly. "Now that's different." Emma immediately showed her the mint. The hostess, smiling broadly, told how, when she was a child, her grandmother made tea from mint and orange peel when she had a cold, and no pills were needed. Alex took the groceries, and then the three of them drank a glass of water with lemon and ice. By evening, Mrs. Lopez promised to cook her stew, and Alex, hearing this, immediately mentally canceled any idea of dining out. They spent the rest of the day lazily. Emma laid out her laptop and tablet on the table and showed Alex a recent school project, posters for a fictional festival called Sea and Font. On one of the designs, the word tide was made up of repeating waves. From a distance, the letters were almost indistinguishable, but up close, the graphics came to life. Alex studied them for a long time, then said, "It's like our mornings. From a distance, it's just light. But if you look closely, there are details that make light light." Emma listened, smiling. She liked the way he called out obvious, intuitive things to her out loud, simply and precisely. In the afternoon, they went out into the yard. Emma sat on the steps, drawing quick sketches of people in a notebook, speed sketches, training her hands and eyes. Alex knocked the dust off the railing, hung up a new hose, and then simply sat down next to him, leaning back slightly, closing his eyes. The wind rustled the leaves, and behind the wall in the yard, a neighbor was playing with his dog and exclaiming something joyfully in Spanish. The world was right here, and now not somewhere later, and this made him feel very calm. In the evening, they went out again for a walk to the water. The sky was turning pink, the air was cool. Teenagers were fishing on the pier, their rods jingling nervously in the gusts of wind. Emma, leaning on the railing, was silent, watching the sun slowly sink into the horizon, not falling, but as if dissolving in the water. Alex stood nearby, and in this silence he wanted to say one simple thing, but not loudly, but as if saying something that is already clear. "You know," he said, "I used to think that happiness was loud, bright, when the heart thunders like drums. Now I understand. Sometimes it sounds like your steps next to you and the steam above your mug in the morning." Emma turned her head, met his gaze, and nodded. "This kind of music suits me." She swung them with clasped hands, smiling. Behind her, someone was laughing, someone was arguing, seagulls were diving toward the water with sharp cries, and the surf lines were coming to the shore one after another, patient, endless. Alex felt that he was finally saying goodbye to the past and looking forward without fear. His new life was just beginning. And this time it was beginning not with a loud gesture, not with an escape, but with such a quiet evening on the pier, with a light salt on the lips, with a warm hand next to him, and with a confidence that tomorrow there would be sun again through the curtains, coffee and a Turk, and a friend's voice somewhere between an omelet and laughter. On the way back, they stopped at El Mar, where Carlos was killing an hour before closing time, wiping down the inside of the storefront window. "You two slackers," he muttered good-naturedly, "hanging out while honest people work." Emma showed him her posters on her phone. Carlos whistled. "I'll have to print one out and put it up here so people can see we're not just a taco place, we're a cultural center." Alex picked up on the cultural taco center joke, and Carlos shook his head, but smiled. "Okay, go ahead while I'm still nice." At home, Mrs. Lopez was already setting the table. The stew was thick and aromatic, with corn and sweet peppers. The bread was still steaming. They sat at the round table, talking about nothing and everything at once, about tomorrow's market, about the neighbor's dog who had learned to open the gate with his nose, about how to properly tie up tomatoes. Alex caught himself thinking that these conversations were also part of his new fabric of life, the very stitches that held the canvas together. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think click to the next one.